Welcome to another episode of the Freedom Field Life and Historical Markers. Today we're going to talk about the boys from Fort Payne and other markers around the Fort Payne area. So stay tuned and let's learn about the Fort Payne area. At the corner of the park in downtown Fort Payne is this tribute to the group Alabama. We have Jeffrey Allen Cook, all the details about him. Randy Ewell Owen, all the details about him. Mark Joel Herndon. And Teddy Wayne Gentry. It says the boys from Fort Payne, 2006 Country Music Hall of Fame inductee. In the late 60s, cousins Randy Owen and Teddy Gentry discovered they shared a common interest in music. Joined by Jeff Cook, they started playing on a regular basis. Working their day jobs and playing any place they could locally in the evenings, the boys in the band used what limited spare time they had to compose and practice their unique style of harmony. In 1973, in tandem with Randy Owen's graduation from Jacksonville State University, the band said goodbye to their daytime jobs and part-time weekend gigs. Bravely Wild Country, as the band was known, left their Lookout Mountain and Fort Payne roots and began perfecting their live performance skills in the club scene around the coastal South Carolina, playing such popular night spots as the Bowery in Myrtle Beach. In 1977, the band changed its name to the Alabama Band and followed that in 1979 by adding drummer Mark Herndon, setting its sights on Nashville. After an appearance on the New Faces show at the Country Radio Seminar in 1980, RCA's Joe Galante came back to his office raving about a young band he had seen. On April 21st, 1980, Alabama signed with industry giant RCA. The label quickly pressed Alabama's autobiographical anthem, My Home's in Alabama, as a single that May. RCA Records issued Tennessee River as the first #1 Alabama hit. Starting with Tennessee River, they would rack up a string of 21 consecutive #1 hits. 21 more would follow, rewarding the band with 42 #1 singles. Alabama became seemingly overnight a driving force in country music, essentially changing it forever. The group began taking the genre in new directions and reaching out to an incredible diverse fan base, many of whom had never before listened to country music. A self-contained band that played their instruments and sang. Alabama influenced an entire generation of country groups along the way. Cherokee Indian removal. Under the provisions of the Cherokee Removal Act of 1830, a log stockade was built 200 yards northeast of Big Spring. The springs supplied abundant water for the Cherokees, the soldiers, and livestock. Fort Payne was used as both an internment camp and a removal fort. It was built by Captain James H. Rogers on a site chosen by Captain John G. Payne. Rogers and 22 soldiers began construction of the fort on April 13, 1838, and remained until the departure of the last group of Cherokees on October 3rd. This group of 1,103 was conducted to Indian Territory by Cherokee leader John Binge. Alabama remains the home of many Cherokee Indians today. We're in this park in downtown Fort Payne, and one of the monuments they have here is to the soldiers of the Southern Confederacy who died to repel unconstitutional invasion, to protect the rights reserved to the people, to perpetuate forever the sovereignty of the states. And then they have this monument here. We're at the Trail of Tears, National Historic Trail, Fort Payne Cabin Historical Site. And this one talks about the Fort Payne Cabin Historical Site. In 1937, federal troops arrived in this area to select a fort location for the collection, holding, and removal of the Cherokee. Part of a much larger compound, this site contained a cabin seized by the troops for use as part of the fort. Today, a stone fireplace, outline of the cabin's foundation, a stacked stone well, and evidence of a roadbed remain. By late summer of 1838, over 1,100 Cherokee were held here in open encampments as soldiers patrolled the perimeter. The majority of the Cherokee forced to leave their homes in Alabama were held at Fort Payne and departed in groups with the Binge Detachment from September 29th through October 3rd, 1838. They had no military escort or armed guards and were led by Cherokees John Binge, conductor, and George Lowry, assistant conductor. They set off from this site, headed west to Indian Territory, an 800-mile journey that became known as the Trail of Tears. Then there's several other markers along the way. Here you can follow their footsteps. Here is where the well was. This was uncovered during an archaeological survey in 2007. It's a 27-foot deep well. It's in pristine condition. Wow. This talks about the cabin site, the various things that they found. This marker talks about the route that they took. And then here is the house chimney and foundation. You see, it was not a very big room, but the chimney was good sized. And then this one talks about Spirit the Preacher, John Huss cabin. So this was a one-dwelling house, 19 by 18 feet, two-story, hewed logs, planked and daubed lined inside with boards, puncheon floor, board loft, and a shingled roof. So this is an interesting area right here in downtown Fort Payne. This marker's for the Fort Payne Opera House, opened in 1890 of September, built during the local boom period, converted into a theater during the era of silent movies, closed as a theater in October of 1935, purchased by Landmarks of DeKalb County, Inc., 1969, renovated, restored, and reopened to the public in 1970. It's the oldest theater in Alabama, located in a building originally constructed as a theater. Here you can see the old Opera House. Here we are in the area that in the mid-1900s was called Whittler's Corner. Folks would gather most any day to whittle, exchange gossip, talk politics, preach, and most of all, just pass time with friends. A large stump was where those who wanted attention would stand. Thus, this reminder to reclaim and commemorate these days. And right in front of this sign is the stump you could stand on. This sign talks about the Main Street Historic District. The Fort Payne Main Street Historic District developed between 1889 and the 1940s because of the city's rapid growth during the hosiery mill industry boom. The increased population needed new commercial and governmental buildings, which were constructed within an approximate 1-block radius of the intersection of Galt Avenue and Main 1st Street, and southwest of the earlier commercial Boomtown district. The district is significant for its late 19th and early mid-20th century commercial and civic architecture, as well as being the main government center of DeKalb County and the city of Fort Payne. The buildings in this district were listed in the National Register of Historic Places in 1989. And here we're standing in front of City Hall. This marker is on the side of a building for Sequoyah, Socks, Song, and Scenery, 200 years of local history. So it goes from 1819 to 1838, which is when the Indians were here, and then the Indians were forced out in 1838. Then another section is for 1888 to 1893, which was the boom period. The iron and coal created the boom period. And then 1907 to 2019, it's the sock capital of the world. In 1907, the first sock mill in Fort Payne was opened. And then Supergroup Alabama in 1969, 3 cousins from Fort Payne founded what would become the most successful country music group of all time. So just a little history of things that happened in the Fort Payne area. This is part of the Trail of Tears National Historic Trail. This is the Willstown Mission Cemetery. Says it's from 1823 to 1839 and 1825 to 1898. I'm not sure why there's 2 sets of dates there. But here's the actual cemetery. Looks like most of these stones are just simply little rocks with no writing on them. This marker says Lebanon, the 4th county seat of DeKalb County, Alabama, February 1st, 1841 to May 1st, 1878. And it's quite possible that this was the actual courthouse. Lebanon Courthouse. Lebanon Courthouse was constructed during the 1840s when Lebanon, the county seat of DeKalb County, was a thriving community with inns, taverns, and government office. This building, built for courthouse use, remained in use as a courthouse until 1876, when the stagecoaches serving Lebanon gave way to Progress. The county seat was then moved to Fort Payne, where railroad service was available. This marker was erected as a part of the DeKalb 150 Sesquicentennial celebration, 1836 to 1986. And I don't know if this was the actual courthouse, but it could very well have been. Well, we're at the Little River Canyon National Preserve in DeKalb County, and this one is Indians, Settlers, and Tourists. Little River Canyon has been attracting humans for over 10,000 years. Ancestors of the American Indians came here to hunt, gather fruits and nuts, and create temporary settlements. In 1540, Hernando de Soto and his army of Spanish soldiers passed through and wrote about the long mountain with waterfalls. Over time, settlers migrated to the area to farm. In 1838, the federal government forced the Cherokee and Creek Indians from their homeland. As communities near the canyon developed in the late 1800s, tourists came to explore the canyon, known as Mays Gulf. In the 1930s, the Civilian Conservation Corps built DeSoto State Park, which is now part of the Little River Canyon National Preserve. Here at the Little River Canyon National Preserve in DeKalb County, this is the Trail of Tears, 1838. In 1838, U.S. soldiers and local militia rounded up over 1,100 men, women, and children in the Little River area during the forced removal of the Cherokee and Muskogee Creek Indians. Soldiers held some of them at Fort Likens and Fort Lovell, east of Lookout Mountain, before moving them to Fort Payne. They crossed Little River near the present-day bridge Cherokee John Binge led the Fort Payne group of American Indians over 798 miles to Indian Territory, which was Oklahoma. The federal government forced tens of thousands of American Indians to leave their homes in 4 states. 1/4 of them died in harsh conditions along the Trail of Tears. Well, I hope you liked this episode on Fort Payne and the boys of Fort Payne, known as Alabama. And we'll see you in the future episodes. Like, subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one.